Good morning, everybody. 1 week. 1 week until the start of the 2021 NFL Draft. Probably 8 days until the Seahawks pick anybody, maybe 9. But regardless, 1 week until the draft starts. And I'm excited. I can't wait to see what this team does with their meager 3 selections. And over the last month, I've spent dozens of hours on this channel going over the prospects we could draft, talking about the prospects that excite me the most, who I think fit what this team needs and what this team wants to do, who have a profile that I think matches what the Seahawks look for in prospects. So I feel pretty confident in saying I have a pretty good feel on what kinds of players the Seahawks hope to target with their picks. Now, if there's any team out there that will throw a complete curveball and just go in a completely different direction, it might be the Seahawks. They've certainly done it before, but we do what we can. We do what we can as fans, and all we can do is look at the evidence, look at the roster, and make our best guesses. And I've spent a lot of time talking about all kinds of different prospects in this draft. And while I do want to emphasize the importance of maintaining your flexibility and objectivity enough to take the best player available when your pick is up, because the best teams typically draft BPA. After really stepping back and looking at the offseason we've had so far in totality and looking at the way in which we've decided to attack free agency, I'm kind of coming to one general conclusion about this draft, and it's something that I really hope the Seahawks are able to keep in mind when it starts in a week. When the 2021 draft comes around, I think that the Seahawks should make every effort to prioritize bringing in offensive talent. Because if you take a look at the offseason the Seahawks have had so far, you're going to find a lot of things that most people are totally on board with, a lot of things that people are really happy with. I think we've given out some very good contracts, and I like the way we have built this team. However, almost all of the changes and signings of significance come on the defensive side of the ball. Carlos Dunlap, we cut him and brought him back on a cheaper contract. It's a good move, but it's defense. Brought back Benson Mayowa for a relatively cheap contract. We brought back Al Woods. He wasn't here last year, but last time he played football was for the Seahawks, so we kind of brought him back. Brian Monet, we brought him back. Poona Ford, we brought him back. Kerry Hyder, we brought him in. Alden Smith, we brought him in. So a lot of the activity the Seahawks had this offseason was strengthening their defensive line. We did lose Jerron Reed, obviously. That was a salary cap casualty, not necessarily an indictment of the player. But a lot of our activity this offseason has been about making this defensive line one of the best and deepest units in the league. And we don't know what's going on with Alden Smith yet, but either way, a lot of time has been spent here. And then you take a look at our cornerbacks. We brought in Ahkello Witherspoon. We brought back Ryan Neal. We brought back Demarius Randall. And we brought in Pierre Desir now, as of yesterday. So we have a lot of resources being spent here. And I don't want to say our cornerbacks this year are better than they were last year, because we lost Shaq and we lost Dunbar. But honestly, I think we're pretty close to getting back to some sort of equilibrium with last year, spending far less money. I'm not saying that any of these guys are better than Shaq was last year, as much as Shaq occasionally struggled, but I feel like the versatility of this group of outside cornerbacks combined with the ability to test somebody out and then pull them if it's not working, I think this cornerback group has a chance to be about as good as it was last year for a lot less cash. And those are really the two areas on the defense that we've seen a lot of activity, because the other areas just didn't need anything. We're basically getting a new linebacker this year anyway, if Darrell Taylor plays at linebacker, and we already have the best safeties in the league. So a lot of stuff happening on the defense, almost all of it good, don't get me wrong. But when you really break it down, what did we do on offense? Okay, offense, we did bring in Gerald Everett on a reasonable contract, decent enough deal, and we traded for Gabe Jackson and restructured his contract into something a little more workable. Great, really cool. I'm not saying anything bad about that. However, I think it's worth pointing out that we replaced two players who retired. We literally had to. We had to replace Greg Olsen and we had to replace Mike Upati. And no disrespect to either of those guys, but it would have been hard to get much worse than either of them. It would have been hard to find a starting tight end worse than Olsen was last year, and it would have been hard to find some left guard who was worse than Mike Upati. No disrespect to Upati's ability on the field, but he can't stay on the field, so basically any half decent guard you bring in who can actually stay on the field is going to automatically be about as good, if not a little better. So, okay, we brought in those two guys. We kind of had a gun to our head there. I don't think any team in the league is incompetent enough to go into a season with Will Dissly as your number one tight end. And we did bring back Chris Carson on a good contract. All right, props, credit where credit's due. We brought back Alex Collins. We'll see if he ends up making the team. We extended Lockett, but he was going to be here anyway. He was under contract for 2021, so that didn't change anything for 2021. We brought back Posick, which a lot of people would argue was not really a favor to the offense so much as the last resort after everyone else got signed. And then we brought back a bunch of backup offensive linemen, Jordan Simmons, Kyle Fuller, and Cedric Ogbuehi. And look, I'm happy they're here because they have a little bit of experience with this group of O linemen, but God willing, they don't ever actually get on the field because they're not good. They're not good. So this offense has a lot in common with the offense last year. Got the same set of receivers, except we're actually a little worse because we don't have David Moore. Same running backs. The main difference there being that Penny takes the place of Hyde, and we'll see if that matters at all because we haven't really seen Penny well for over a year, coming up on 2 years. And the offensive line is the same outside of Gabe Jackson. Not saying that isn't significant, but it's the same offensive line. We did get a upgrade at starting tight end, but the tight end room is otherwise just the same. You just swap out one old guy with one middle-aged guy. And we still have a hole at wide receiver 3. We have a hole arguably at wide receiver 2. We could use some actual top-end depth, guys who can push the starters on the offensive line. And this offseason, we really kind of deprioritized that. So what I'm trying to say here, this offseason so far feels like it has Pete Carroll's fingerprints all over it, which is fine and makes sense. He is our head coach. But we have dumped so much of our attention into making our defensive line amazing and making our cornerbacks deep with Carroll-type talents that it feels like one of those Carroll off seasons where he just goes, let me build my defense and the offense will just deal with whatever crap I throw it and just don't turn the ball over and my defense will win the game. And I don't want that. So when this draft comes around, when our pick comes up in 8 days or maybe even 9 if we trade back a few times, and the right guy is there, I'm not saying you shouldn't take him. If Eric Stokes is there at 56, do it. If Caleb Farley's there, then oh my God, please do it. If God, there are good defensive players in this draft, and I'm not saying don't take them, but you have to think about what happened at the start of this offseason when Wilson started kicking up dirt about how unhappy he was. And while this offseason has been really good, I think, it's actually kind of staggering how little we have done to address the offense that Wilson seems so unhappy with. I already kind of mentioned, this offensive line looks a lot like the offensive line from last year. And if you take a look at the offense as a whole, again, you've got Everett and you've got Gabe Jackson, and everything else is roughly the same. So when the draft comes around and you're picking at number 56, because let's say you don't trade, because I don't really want to trade, as I've already said. Bring me a tight end who can start alongside Everett and be somebody who gets really involved in the offense. Bring me a third wide receiver. Bring me a center who can push Posick. Bring me a right tackle who can push Shell. Bring me a running back who can play on third downs. Bring me something on offense because as I really stepped back and took a look at this offseason, it actually really kind of hit me. We've really been dumping most of our resources into the defense, and it seems like we've given the offense only a courtesy amount of resources to work with. Not bad, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough because not only are we talking about Russell Wilson coming off an offseason where he started kicking up dirt, we've also got a brand new offensive coordinator who has never done play calling before. And for both of those guys, I don't want there to be any excuse in 2021. I want to give both those guys the best possible opportunity to succeed. So I'm going to say it again. If the right guy is there at a position like cornerback or even, I don't know, one tech, I'm not saying pass up a super steal. But whatever you have to do, come out of this draft with some guys who can help this offense. Because if a year from now or 10 to 11 months from now, if we're coming off another disappointing season where Wilson just didn't get it done, he choked, he failed, he didn't perform, whatever, and we decide, okay, we're done with this, we're just going to trade him, we're going to be done with this, we're going to send him to the Bears, we're going to send him to the Raiders or whatever. If we decide to move on from Wilson next year because he doesn't perform this year, I want to be really confident that it's just because he isn't any good. I want to be really confident it's because he failed. I want to know that it's on him. I don't want to do that and find myself trying to figure out, was it him or did we set him up for failure? Did we not give him enough stuff to work with around him? So let's try to use the last few bits of this offseason to improve this offense to where Wilson and Waldron both have no excuse. That's what I'm going to say. That's the main takeaway of this video. I've really thought about it, and while I still want to stand by my belief that taking best player available at your positions of need is probably the best way to do business, let's really try to make it so that we can bring in one, maybe even two rookie contributors on offense specifically. Because I don't want this to be a complete Pete Carroll team. I know Pete Carroll's the head coach, and I know he gets to call the shots, but I don't want this to be one of those complete Pete Carroll teams where we run the ball 70% of the time, quarterback throws it deep 10 times a game to keep the defense honest, and then we just win every game with our defense. That's not what I want. I don't think that's what the fans want. I don't think that's winning football anymore. So, something to keep in mind a week before the draft. And I'm going to get out of here on that note. Peace out. Go Hawks. I've said this before, but I'll just announce it here. I will be streaming the draft in its entirety all 3 days. So keep an eye out for some stream times to be announced for the draft. And we're going to have a lot of fun watching this, even though we're only going to be picking probably a few times. So yeah, bring me somebody who can help this offense be better in 2021. I want to give my quarterback no excuse to not perform, and I want to give my offensive coordinator every opportunity to show what he can do in control of an offense. See you guys later.